Hey guys, so we're going to talk about intraspecific interactions today. And I think it's actually a pretty brief lecture, but we'll see. So, a few different types of interactions that we see within individuals within the population. So, of course, intraspecific means within a species. We see schooling in fish. We know that schooling can reduce the risk of predation. It can increase the reproductive success of individuals within a population. In some cases, it can increase the efficiency of finding food and herd behavior in general, or social foraging, as we talked about at the very beginning of the semester with swallowtail kites, is a strategy of just non-competitive sharing of food resources that gives everyone in the population more access. Mobbing behaviors we see in vertebrates as well. This is when one or a few individuals in a population chase or antagonize a potential predator. You see it a lot in birds. The primary purpose of mobbing is just to force the predator to move on, get them out of the area. Mating behaviors, there are obvious reasons for the need for a lot of intraspecific interaction and cooperation in order for species to mate, in order for them to raise their young. That requires very close cooperation. And mated pairs are most successful at raising their young when they have each other, when they have help to do that. We see social hierarchies and dynamics within individuals in a population associated with that. Female dominated or matriarchal populations are one we see, and then of course patriarchal are male dominated populations. And dominant individuals usually are older members of the group that can control activities within the group until they are challenged by a younger rival. And, as much as we do see cooperation within family groups to raise young and find food, we also sometimes don't always see cooperation within family members. So sibling rivalry is an instance of that and can be carried out to a deadly extreme. We see what we refer to as siblicide in birds of prey, when one of the young will actively attack and kill the other nestmate and take advantage of all of the food resources. So for us to have all this communal behavior, of course, we need a way to have communication. And the book goes into a lot of detail on the different types of communication that we see in vertebrates. So for organization to exist at all within a population, in order to have social structure or family groups, schools, flocks, herds, we really need some form of unambiguous communication to exist. And so we'll talk a little bit about olfactory communication. It's widespread amongst vertebrates and in some cases can be the primary mode that species use. These chemical signals are exchanged between members of the same species, are known as pheromones, and we've talked a lot already about the organs that exist that allow for species, the olfactory in particular, that allows for species to sense these pheromones and recognize them. Pheromones can contain a steroid or steroid-like organic compounds. They may represent a primitive communication technique that has been retained, and they act on some really basic functions. They may attract members of the same species for courtship behavior. They help to stimulate ovulation They can be used as a warning sign. They're used to mark territories and boundaries, and they can also be used to indicate when there's danger. So we see pheromones being used in all classes of vertebrates: fish, salamanders, lizards, snakes. They're well developed in mammals, especially those with a keen sense of smell. And scent marking in particular is a well recognized and important aspect of mammalian communication. Sound is also an essential form of communication. So the production and reception of sound is most highly developed in the neurons of birds, bats, primates. Fish, I think we talked about during the fish lecture, may produce sounds by contracting muscles attached to their swim bladder. Other fish can create sounds by grinding their teeth or rubbing the base of their spine against a socket. I have a noisy dog under my desk. Sorry about that. Sound production in salamanders is limited, but there's some auditory communication in highly developed male neurons, particularly during the breeding season. So the male possesses vocal sacs that serve as resonating chambers, and the purpose of these calls is, of course, to advertise their location and to try to attract females into their territories. And as you are all well aware, males of many species of birds have highly developed sound communication for territorial songs, announcing that there is a resident that is sexually mature, attempting to attract a mate to that area, and of course, defending that area off against challenging males. There's been a lot of study actually of bird song as a discipline, and the bird learning pathways are highly selective for their own species song, very sensitive to the right information in learning vocalizations. And there's, of course, fascinating instances of species like the brown-headed cowbird who are raised in the nest of other bird species, never encounter their own kind during that early development, yet go on to develop that really unique call of the brown-headed cowbird. And males use other methods to create sound as well. So during courtship displays, Anna's hummingbird will soar really high and dive 98 feet, whizzing by the female so fast that the tail feathers make a chirping sound. And, you know, sound reception is very efficient and developed in mammals as well. So vocal cords for producing sound are well developed. The middle ear, of course, is well developed to receive that sound, with the three bones, the malleus, the incus, and the stapes, all there for receiving sound. So a little more on mammals. So there are some incredible examples of communication in general using sound in mammals. We know that they can squeak, they can bark, they can howl. Sorry about my noisy dog. They can bellow, they can roar, neigh, moo, on and on. They engage in chattering and tail rattling and drumming on the ground with their hind feet. We know that some mammalian species actually have a vocabulary of different warning calls, ranging from barks to a chuckle to a fear scream or a fighting snarl. Howler monkeys of Panama have a vocabulary of over 15 to 20 different calls. And it's really fascinating that some rodents, including squirrels, can elicit a ultrasonic call that are out of the range of humans and presumably other predators. And it's a way of sending silent warnings to those in their family group. And of course, the songs of humpback whales range from 40 hertz to 5 kilohertz and can be detected more than 18 miles away. One of the functions of humpback whale songs is thought to serve as a spacing mechanism, but also for courtship males advertising their sexual availability for females. And there are other mammals that are thought to have infrasounds as well outside of the human range of hearing, including elephants, hippopotamus, and alligators. So visual cues that we see for communication occur in all vertebrate groups and require, of course, the eye being a highly specialized sensory organ to be able to detect those visual cues. In fish, vision is important, and it's important for finding food and for communicating with other fish. Brightly colored fish can be arranged in a wide variety of patterns that are easily observed by members within the species. In birds, some of the visual cues that we see include the evolution of special breeding plumes, like you see on this great egret here, that are displayed during the breeding season to announce the fact that they are indeed in breeding condition. And so in mammals, vision is important for recognizing the movements of facial and ear muscles that are communicating a lot. They can communicate threat and submission. They can be used to communicate a greeting, also for recognition of special patches of hair that are displayed at appropriate times. Vision may be important for recognizing body posture, like the way the tail is carried in certain carnivores, and interpreting the behavior and actions of the other members. And we also see tactile signals amongst individuals in a group. They're particularly important for reproductive behaviors for some vertebrates. Some of the examples we learned about are the long nails on the front limbs of the male painted turtle are actually used to stimulate the female to put them in breeding condition. And we see similar grooming, licking, nuzzling as a way of communication involving touch, most often associated with placing, with putting others in breeding condition. Mutual grooming that we see in some primates not only serves to help eliminate ectoparasites, but it's also really important for establishing social bonds within those groups. Electrical signals, we see that in some groups of fish that use electrical discharges for intraspecific signaling. It could be for courtship, as a way to recognize individuals within the population, or even for antagonistic behaviors as well. So feeding behaviors. Feeding is a communal activity in a lot of different species in birds and mammals. Mammals often cooperate to hunt large prey in groups. Some primates, like chimpanzees and gorillas, orangutans, live in troops and family units that readily share food availability. We see tool use amongst individuals, and we see learned behavior of that tool use being shared amongst individuals within a family or a population. And at this point, gosh, there was a time that we thought that tool use really was what separated higher primates from all other organisms. But at this point, tool use has been demonstrated in crocodiles and dolphins, birds and mammals. I was just listening to a podcast talking about tool use in rats and sewer rats. So innovation of behaviors is incredible, and it's often shared amongst its members in a population. And so even though the interaction of predation is thought to be an interspecific interaction, there are times that we see aggressive behaviors, of course, between individuals in a population, and even when individuals are highly stressed, we sometimes see cannibalism as a form of intraspecific predation. The book went into quite a bit of detail on dormancy in general and torpor and hibernation. So torpor usually occurs in amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. It is a generalized term for when vertebrate species can reduce their metabolism. They often are able to reduce their body temperature and conserve resources to get through a period of time until they're able to be active again and acquire food. So torpor in birds, we see it in black-capped chickadees. They basically go into a regulated hyperthermia where they lower their body temperature. That allows them to conserve almost 25% of their hourly metabolic expenditure. So dormancy during the winter over longer periods of time is referred to, of course, as hibernation. So lots of species hibernate, particularly mammals. Many species of bat hibernate in clusters and caves as a means of reducing loss of heat and water. And recently, a hormone has been discovered that they think helps to elicit this hibernation behavior and play a major role in triggering it and maintaining it through the duration of the winter. In ectothermic groups, we actually see sort of forced hibernation. Those guys are out and about, and as the temperature drops, their metabolic activity naturally decreases to the point where the animal goes to find a place to take refuge and moves into its hibernacula and waits it out until temperatures are warm enough for it to be active again. So mammals in particular are rich in stories of hibernation. Mammals have other morphological changes that can happen during the winter to help them conserve heat. We see shivering, and we see the development of an underfur under the coats of many mammals. In some of our marine mammals, we see a thick layer of blubber that appears to help with heat conservation of these warm-blooded species. True hibernation among mammals includes a lot of different factors: lower metabolic rate, lower body temperatures, closer to the ambient temperature of the air, much lower heart rate and breathing rates, lower blood pressure, and the kind of deactivation of endocrine glands. So, for example, during hibernation in grizzly bears, they do not eat, drink, or excrete any bodily waste for up to 6 months. The metabolic rate decreases by 50 to 60%, and their body temperature drops from 100 degrees Fahrenheit to maybe 88 degrees. Respiration drops from 10 breaths per minute to only one every 45 seconds or so. Other species enter more of a semi-dormant state. That includes some of the species in the eastern US that don't live in such cold areas: black bears, eastern chipmunks, skunks, raccoons, possums. They don't experience quite the drastic changes in their bodily systems and their body temperatures, and they may even maintain their body temperatures at about the same level as the ambient temperature, but still greatly reduce their metabolic rate. And there is ongoing research about ultimately what triggers hibernation. Climatic factors like colder temperatures are thought to play a role, with cold rain and snow being partially responsible. Um, Changing daylight has also been suggested as the cause for that. There has been a bit of research that has looked at isolating some of the compounds that help hibernating individuals stay in the hibernation state, and they've detected a chemical compound that seems to be structurally related to opiates like morphine. So I'm just getting put under. You know, throughout our discussions of the different vertebrate groups, we talked about countercurrent exchange quite a few times. There's so many ways that this as a mechanism of physics allows for conservation of resources, oxygen, and heat. So countercurrent heat exchange is shown here in the leg of the Arctic wolf and also in a dolphin. So that first part of this figure shows how the extremities actually cool when the animal is exposed to lower temperatures from 37 degrees Celsius at their core down to 0 degrees on their feet, and not much higher than that in the mid portion of their leg. That C area shows a portion of the main artery and the vein serving the front leg and showing how heat is exchanged between the outflowing arterial blood and the inflowing venous blood, and essentially just shunting the heat back into the animal's body. And the dolphin picture, we see that each artery in the flipper and even in the fluke of a dolphin is surrounded by several veins, and that permits the venous blood to be warmed by heat transfer from the arterial blood before it re-enters. So really cool heat conservation mechanisms at play there. This is just a fun, quick video on life underwater and under ice with fish. The book talked a little bit about some of the mechanisms that allow fish to persist in really cold environments. So some fish avoid freezing solid even at temperatures below the freezing point. They do that in 3 different ways. So they produce a solute that actually lowers the freezing point of their body fluids. They can produce an antifreeze protein that binds to the ice crystals and inhibits the crystal's growth, or they can actually supercool their bodies by lowering the freezing point of the serum and just defying the normal freezing temperatures. There are other vertebrates out there that are known to be able to withstand freezing, including frogs and snakes, turtles and salamanders, and even Arctic ground squirrels. So estivation is a type of dormancy. Some vertebrates become dormant for periods of time during the hot summer months or other times of stress. So estivation is thought to be triggered by either a reduction in the food supply or a reduction in water resources, and it allows the animals to essentially shut down in the same way they do in hibernation. There are some amazing examples of estivation with lungfish that live in areas subject to flooding and that can stay in a dormant state for months or even years. And also in salamanders and frogs and toads, all are known to estivate as well. And that is all I got for you for intraspecific interactions. So I'll shut her down.